with this piece, Fade Into You, I was really looking at, I mean, I have an image of the water that I took one night while I was driving around Shelley Bay. There was this amazing orange light sort of cast onto the waves, and it showed them up so beautifully. I had to stop and take a whole group of photographs about it. And that's what I had in my mind as I was painting this piece. I had my phone here somewhere, and I had it on at one point to kind of, I think I've got a drawing on this canvas initially. And so often what happens when I'm painting is I'm not entirely aware. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm not aware of what is going to happen. I have an idea of what I want to happen, but it's like this subconscious process will take over and dictate what will happen. And then I'll realise that months before I've actually thought about this and wanted to do something like it, and it kind of chooses to come in and be present and take over at that point. And it's really about that moment where liquids are becoming atmosphere and the atmosphere is becoming liquid, you know, that sort of transition between the sea becoming cloud, coalescence, and that magical moment. And I didn't want the painting to be literal. I just didn't want people to look at something and be fed something and be told what it is they were looking at. I wanted it to be a little ambiguous so that some people would look at it and go, oh, that's definitely clouds, or that I can see the sea, I'm going to fall in. Someone said I feel like I can just walk into the water. And so there's this little, I've had to let go a lot of my preconceived notions of what it is I should be doing. As a trained illustrator, I really... and a commercial artist, there was always that working to a brief and making something real. It had to be realistic. And the freedom that I've found in oil paint in particular, and that journey of it taking you somewhere, and here I'm listening to a whole playlist I've made for this piece. Music, I think, is a big driver. My mum is a trained concert pianist, and I grew up listening to her play of an evening. I'd come home and there would be, you know, the windows would be open and the light would be on, and she'd be playing Beethoven or Rachmaninoff or Khachaturian, Chopin. And I think a lot of what I do here is based also somehow around those frequencies of sound, but this is really an exploration of light. And I have to stop myself. At some point, I want to go back and I want to rework that painting, and I want to make it what it was supposed to be initially. And I'm learning more and more to stop that and to trust in the process of creating a piece and to leave it as it wants to be, rather than, me taking over and making it what I wanted it to be. And I'm finding a real joy in doing that. It's been difficult. It's been 4 years that I've sort of been playing and fighting with that, and it seems to be finally coming to some kind of fruition. And the technique I'm using, I have been using rubber brushes quite a lot, but here I really wanted to have this feeling of trailing out the light and blurring it as I was painting. In the past, I've painted up in layers, starting out from a sepia sketch, but I'm really loving this wet into wet painting, it's called. And I did rework it a little bit after we did this, just a tiny bit, but I wanted to leave it really. And I think I might be going through my blue phase. I know Picasso went through a rose and a blue phase, but I am just so in love with the feeling of blue, what it does to the viewer. So this part of the process now, this next step, is taking the refined wax sculpture that will fit within the mould of the frame, and I'm building a clay wall around the edge so that I can put the silicone mould making material over the top of the sculpture in order to capture it and to recast it into different materials. That's the really awesome thing about mould making, is your ability to try different materials. And in this case with the resin, I had to use a very particular type of silicone. The ability to use clay makes it so much easier and cheaper. And yeah, while we're talking about that, this is a completely new discipline and part of my practice. We've had an incredible artist, Arena Kennedy, who's moved in to Bayview Studios, and I've been her student. I've been working with her to understand this whole process, which is something she's very skilled at. And we've spent many an afternoon learning and talking about art and about the process of sculpture. So here I am going out on my own with it after spending a couple of months with her learning this whole technique of mould making and sculpture. Although I don't know she has worked in resin, I know she's worked in glass. This part of the process is crucial for being able to cast into resin. I didn't want to do 3D printing necessarily. I love the whole hand process, I think, of this part. Being able to work with the clay is kind of nice. It brings back lots of memories of working with my grandma in her studio. She was a sculptor and a potter in South Australia and a teacher of art, and it brings back lots of really fond memories of being with her in her studio. I remember her having a garlic crusher which she would use to make hair for her Dickensian sculptures, make these lovely curly forms from that. So yeah, and here the next part, now that the wall's been built around to hold the silicone, it's quite a quick process. Throw them in together, mix them. I think it's got a working time of about, a half an hour. Not that you really need it, but this is a pourable silicone I'm using here. And in she goes. And I actually didn't have enough silicone. So yes, that involved, I did a second pour, and that gave me the lovely flat base, the flat plane, so that when I turn my mould over and I fill it with the resin, I know that it's completely flush and flat to how it needs to be to go within the frame.